If I had to guess, I'd say the only episodes of MLP Josh Haber saw before writing were A Look Before You Sleep, the first half of Swarm of the Century, Follow Other Friends, the last half of Suited for Success, and, like, Dragonshy or something. Or if not, those were the only episodes he cared to draw any inspiration from. I have a reason for bringing that up, and that's to point out that Applejack has a really hearty role in all of those episodes, and all the other characters are presented rather myopically. I am talking about Flanderization. Like in Castlemania, where Pinkie Pie bangs her head against a bell, or Rarity yells at the walls, and Twilight sits around obliviously reading her books, and Fluttershy does Fluttershy things. But Applejack was great. With the exception of Pinkie Apple Pie, which came out later on, Castlemania was the best Applejack episode since Luna Eclipsed, or even as far back as Look Before You Sleep. We got to see some real human, pony emotion from her. She's scared, she's fearful, she's afraid. This is good. Applejack is usually played so straight she gets boring. Or the writers go too far in the opposite direction, and she comes off as stupid. AJ is like the Spike of the main six. She's whatever she needs to be when she needs to be it. And then there's Simple Ways, where again every pony was written like crap except for Applejack. Mostly because her no-nonsense voice of reason role didn't come off as incredibly boring this time. And if it wasn't for the way he so thoroughly broke up Rarity's character, just so that she could fit into the conflict without any of her depth getting in the way, this could have been a really great Applejack episode. So what I'm getting at is that I think Josh Haber really likes Applejack. Which is great, because we need writers who are willing to treat AJ with the respect she deserves. And yes, I do think she deserves respect even though she's my least favorite character in the show. That doesn't mean that I've given up on her, or that I think she has no potential. Now there was a brief window of time where I was looking forward to Leap of Faith. It happened right in between reading this and reading this. You see, none of the key episodes were all that great, except for Rarity Takes Manhattan. And Applejack has significant problems when she's called upon to carry an episode all by herself. For example, her most important episode is predicated on a character trait that didn't exist in the previous episode. So I started out with really low expectations, which went up slightly when I found out Josh Haber was writing this episode. But then my expectations got set unreasonably high when I found out the Flim Flam brothers were coming back. As a little history lesson, the Flim Flam brothers were my favorite villains in the show. Not that they had much competition. And they also sang my favorite song in the whole series. But the best thing about them is that they weren't con men. At least they weren't in Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000. They delivered on everything they said they would. They could actually make more cider that tasted good faster than the Apple family. At least until the rest of the main six started helping, which Flim and Flam allowed. And then they started cutting corners, and they sacrificed the quality of their product, and they got chased out of town. But they never did anything shady. Fast forward a season and a half, and now they're full-blown con artists.
Hypothetically? Theoretically?
I mean, this isn't even Flanderization. This is just libel. It's the kind of thing that makes me think if Josh Haber wrote an episode with Iron Will in it, he'd probably be a wife-beater. And then I see what his real game is. He's writing all the supporting characters really poorly on purpose to make AJ look better. You think Pinkie Pie is best pony? Well, now she's banging her head against a bell. You think Rarity is best pony? Well, now she's playing a racist caricature for best friend in order to impress some guy. You think Flim and Flam are great? Well, now they're thieves. If that is his game, he slipped up. AJ isn't even very well written in this episode. Most of it was covered in the key episode shakedown, but there's also this.
I'm glad you're feeling good, but how do you know it's from the tonic?
Why do you automatically assume it's not from the tonic? You live in Equestria. A plant made you shrink. You were a breezy 4 episodes ago. You got sucked into an enchanted comic book. Why is it so hard to believe this tonic works? Not to mention that if you truly believe that Granny's fear of water was all in her head, why didn't you try to convince her to get back in the water earlier? It's also a little weird that Granny Smith would call Flim and Flam bamboozlers back in Super Speedy Cider Squeezy, but believes them here sight unseen. But I guess I can chalk that one up to senility. What kind of fish can you catch using an apple as bait? This thing shouldn't float. What did I like about this episode? Well, not much. This episode is really efficiently written. Pretty much all the dialogue in it is in service of the plot. So your enjoyment of the episode hinges entirely on whether or not you actually like the story it's telling. Now, I do typically enjoy efficient writing, but to me MLP is less about what's happening and more about who it's happening to and how they react to it. So an episode like this, with almost no little things in it, is entirely sink or swim. And I just didn't care for it. I guess I liked the song, but it was nothing compared to their first outing. I think it's interesting that if they don't make a sale by the last line of their song, it has a really disappointing fizzle-out ending.
Make you shorter, taller, or even grow old. But who'd want that when with one drink you can be young again?
And that sort of makes sense, seeing as how they're confidence men now. If they don't own the crowd, they have no business being there, so it doesn't matter if their song finishes strong or not. I mean, it's a nice touch, but it certainly doesn't make up for their change in character. I like seeing Big Mac get a scene or two, but I kind of want to hear him talk. You know, for real, like at the start of Applebuck season. Unfortunately, I think they've built it up too much. Fun fact, this is only the 4th episode of MLP that only features one of the main 6. 5th if this doesn't count. And it's the first of those episodes that doesn't feature all 3 of the Cutie Mark Crusaders.